we are joined with Ted Rall. Ted Rall is political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, and one of my favorite people to talk to. How you doing, Ted? You doing all right this morning, man?
I'm pretty good. I broke my wrist about a week and a half ago, so I'm kind of like on pins and needles. I'm going in for the follow-up visit on Monday. And aside from the fact that it's, of course, out of network, which is pertinent to the news these days,
Yeah.
I'm going in on Monday, and if they like what they see, then it's like just keep wearing the brace. Everything's cool. You're doing great. Go home. But if they don't like what they see, they're going to break it right there and then and reset
are
it
you
and then
serious?
send me into surgery. So it's kind of like, yeah, Monday's going to be either a great day or not a great day.
I feel you, man. Things have been tough here too, but not, fortunately, not any breaks or anything like that. I don't have insurance either, so I feel you. Insurance will
I
get the
do have
job.
insurance. It's just
Oh, you have
useless.
insurance. Good. At
But
very
I
least,
think
you have
that's,
insurance.
and we can talk about that. But I mean, that's kind of like, I think, what people always talk about. And I'm guilty of this too. Whenever I write about the health crisis in this country, I always focus on the uninsured, and rightly so. But what we don't talk about is the fact that being insured is kind of not much different than being uninsured.
It still sucks. I mean, like, the idea that you lose a job and they say, but hey, you can get Cobra and it only costs $1,000 a month. It's like, I just lost my job. What are you talking
Aren't you
about?
lucky? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
aren't you fortunate now that you have the option to get this? And it's like, you guys have lost your mind. Like, the idea that the country functions this way is deplorable. Like, insurance should not be tethered to jobs. It should
No.
be. And then, what sucks about it, Joe Biden gets in and says, I'm going to have a public option. And then immediately forgets it the moment he gets in office. Again, that is one of
Barack
the biggest.
Obama said the same thing. Yeah.
These people are liars. And, you get people like on The View who are shocked by the whole thing that Joe Biden lied about pardoning Hunter Biden. And it's like,
Right.
I don't even call it a lie anymore. Okay, you people are in a cult. You have lost your mind. It is literally a lie. And he
Right.
did so for purely cynical reasons of Donald Trump is saying that the legal system is a fraud. The legal system is out to get me, et cetera, et cetera.
Which it
Democrats are like,
was. Which it
it
was.
was. That's the
Right.
wild part. And
He was
Democrats
right.
are like, well, we believe in justice and we believe in it so much that Joe Biden is even giving his son up to the justice system. I mean, it's like, okay, you guys are so
For he loved the American people so much
right.
that he gave one
For
of his
Biden
two
so
only
loved the
sons.
world that he gave his only begotten crackhead son. You mentioned I'm glad you mentioned healthcare. The CEO that got shot. And what's wild about that? To show how much the American public hates the healthcare system, after he gets shot, people applauded. Think
Yeah.
about that. Like,
Yeah.
if you look at the comments on the video of him being shot, it's people effectively laughing or applauding. Just astonishing. And this happened in New York.
99%. I've been
Yeah.
reading all the comment sections at the Times, the Post, all over the place. Obviously on all the socials. It's 99%. There's 1 in 100 who are like, come on, guys, like, it's not cool. He's a human being. Like, we shouldn't be talking like that. Even the 1% who, who say we shouldn't be talking that way, they're not saying, guys, he was a great man. I mean, this was a good man. Like, he was awesome. I want to put this really into perspective here. When Donald Trump, the assassination attempt, right, which claimed the tip of his ear, this is a highly polarized electorate. Half the country despises Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
There was not nearly as much contempt from Democrats who do hate Trump for him, and as much glee. There was some glee, but for this relatively minor thing,
they didn't want to say it. They didn't want to say it.
Right.
Like, they were,
but
it
they're
was
willing to
muted
say it
glee.
here.
Yeah,
that's right. That's really a good point, Jamal. Right? People feel safe. Like, like you're allowed to say this person was evil and deserved to die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's remarkable. I mean,
Yeah.
I live very close to the youth hostel where he allegedly stayed. I'm not sure it's the same guy. I think the NYPD are kind of like blowing smoke up our.
Well, he showed his face. He was apparently flirting with some tech or some receptionist, and she asked him to pull down. And so he pulled down his mask. They actually have a picture of the guy. If it wasn't for that, They would
If
have.
that's him, I'm not
Well,
sure it's
if
him.
that's him, fair enough. Fair
I
enough.
don't.
Fair
I'm
enough.
not sure it's him. And here's my thinking. Right, like Junior Detective. I was talking to Scott Stantis about this, cartoonist, and we stare at faces like the day is long. We all do as human beings, but we do it more.
Yeah.
So first of all, those aren't the same jackets. The shooter wore a jacket without pockets. The guy in the youth hostel has got big pockets. Okay, you're a guy. No guy in the history of guys ever has traveled with two jackets. We don't do that. Men
That's
don't
true.
travel with two jackets. So and you're like, well, you can. Yeah, you can, but you don't. Okay.
Right. Not typically. It's too much weight to carry with you. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's like, especially this guy was probably traveling super light. He came in allegedly on the Port Authority bus from somewhere, stayed at a youth hostel. So he's traveling light. He's there to assassinate someone. He's traveling light. He's not breaking his curling iron.
Right. He's not on vacation. Right.
Right. He's on vacation. And he doesn't seem to be stupid, right? So this would be stupid on his part. And then there's the facial features. I can see why the cops thought it was the same dude. The eyebrows and the nose are very similar, but the eyes are totally not the same. They're not the same eyes. And I know all us white guys look the same, but like really, truly, I don't think it's the same dude. I don't think. And
honestly,
I hope that like the wrong dude doesn't get shot accidentally, because I really don't think that's
him. If it's not the same guy, then they have nothing.
I don't think they've got anything.
Wow.
And like I got to tell all the New Yorkers I know who oh, would you have, if you saw that guy, what would you do? And people, like, everyone I talk to is like, either give him a high five or invite him to stay at my place. Ron Kuby, who's on my Facebook feed, famous left-wing lawyer, he's like, hey, if you happen to have shot a healthcare CEO and you need a lawyer, call me.
God, man, what's wild about that? Like, there's an irony associated with this. He is a healthcare guy, meaning all things being equal, you would think healthcare, keeping people alive, keeping people safe, and you would think that people would be appreciative of keeping them alive and keeping them safe. But it gets across, you are doing something wrong if the American public sees you get murdered on video and they just like think about how wild that is.
I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think I know why, right?
Yeah.
Because that guy he literally is an existential threat to you personally. I mean, you might not like a politician like Harris or Biden or Trump, but they don't threaten you personally unless like maybe they're at a drone control in the White House and you're in the Middle East. But they don't. You can hate them, you can hate their policies, but everybody's dealt with these insurance companies and put in a claim and had it, or like a pre-approval request and had it turned down. And sometimes it's for something that's just annoying that you'd like to get taken care of. Although that's maddening, like I had something stupid turned down like years ago. It still pisses me off to have my warts removed from my hand. I'm like, they're like, oh, you don't have to have, you can live with those. Like, what? And then, but like people who have life-threatening conditions. My mom fell, broke her wrist. I mean, her hip. Her hip separated completely from her leg, completely. And then so I get this social worker who's a nice lady, obviously beleaguered, trying to do her best, calls me from Ohio and says, okay, so starts using all this jargon, right? My head's just spinning. Like, my mom is my entire family. I was raised only by her. I don't have any siblings. I don't have a father. I mean, it's just her.
Same here.
So I'm spinning out, right? And they're like, start using all this jargon, like, oh, so we need to know, her insurance will cover her for 3 more days, and we need to know, are you going to go with self-payment?
Wow.
Are you going to go with, what are you going to do? I'm like, what? And it's like she's just, and the hospital was $24,000 a day just for the room. And I'm like, can she stay at the Marriott? I mean, it's like for the room. That's not including any.
That's outrageous.
Any treatment, right? Best hotel room in the world, right? I mean, invest in hospital stocks. I mean, it's obviously a great business. And so I'm just thinking. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do. And like so people, I mean, people have, we know that hundreds of thousands of Americans die annually because they don't get, their insurance companies don't sign up. So literally, that you could get, I don't know, you get a disease, you get hit by a car, something can happen to you, and you can end up in a situation where, sick as you are, you or your loved ones, assuming you have any, are on the phone dealing with these assholes who are basically just like, who don't even know you, who haven't even laid eyes upon you, and they're deciding whether or not you live or die, or whether you have any quality of life if you live. And so, yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're not going to hate, that's apex hatred, because it's really personal.
And everybody has dealt with it. That's right. I look, man, I would tell you, my mom was getting, she was trying to get medical treatment for her niece. And she was trying to get, either it was a drug or it was a treatment, and the insurance company was like, yeah, no. And like, they have fundamentally created a business model of where denying you is advantageous to the business model. So it's like, so you have healthcare, but denial of healthcare is one of the things that is important in that business model of healthcare. It is bizarre. I was working at this company, and beside our company was another company that, I got to be honest, at the time I didn't even know existed, that dealt with, they would hire doctors to deny care. So it's like, let's say you call the insurance company, and there will be a doctor, and the doctor would say, oh, they don't need that. And they come back, I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas, we have decided that you don't need this particular treatment. You can use this other thing that doesn't work as well, that is cheaper.
Right.
That is maddening. Like that is maddening. And
we need a law that says as follows: if a doctor signs off on it, the insurance company has to pay for it.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
I mean, and then we could get into all the other crap like the deductibles and and the co-pays and all that. But that's first. If a doctor says it's on, it's on. And I'm old enough to remember, Jamal, like back in the 1970s, 60 Minutes used to have all these exposés. Because back then, I remember my mom had Blue Cross Blue Shield. She was a teacher. And it was great. Okay, it's hard to believe that. It's not the same company now at all. I'm sure it's not even like,
what is it, Blue Choice or something now?
Well, it's still now it's like there's different. There's Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's Empire Blue, and I don't even understand. But the point is, it was back then. You had Blue Cross Blue Shield. That was like a platinum American Express card. You just showed that, boom. You never heard anything again. You never received a bill. C'est tout. So back then it was great. But anyway, 60 Minutes would have these exposés about, particularly in Florida for some reason, where these like strip mall doctors would be running these scams where they're, prescribing all scripts for all sorts of unnecessary tests for like their buddies, and they're collecting like $1 million each. Okay, so HMOs, which appeared in the Reagan era in the early 80s, were supposed to be, and now our current system is all completely evolved or devolved from that. That was supposed to fix that problem, and well, it sure has fixed that problem. But now we've gone from a situation where 1% of doctors were prescribing tests that maybe you didn't necessarily need in order to grift a little bit. Now you have 100% of doctors being turned down for completely legitimate care, and it's completely out of control. I mean, today the New York Times has a piece about like, healthcare CEOs have been woken up by this incident. And I was thinking, they're going to stop denying claims? No, they're going to hire more security.
Right, they're going to hire security guards.
I don't think there's enough security in the world to save you fuckers.
Yeah, man, I was watching.
Good luck, and you're never going to find anyone to convict, by the way. I mean,
I was watching the tweets.
I'm on that jury. I'm saying everything to get on that jury. I can be objective. Yeah, I don't have any opinion. I have not even heard about this case. What case? Healthcare, never heard of it. Yes, I'm on. And it's like,
if it's up to me, that guy walks.
Jury nullification, Ted Rall, right here.
Yeah, if it's up to me, that guy walks. That guy's going home. I'm giving that guy.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And I know that's grim, but
beers are on me after trial. Yeah.
Right. Right after you walk out here. I know it's grim, but it's like people like, it is a horrible industry. And it's not like, it's something that all of us on some level at some
And
point are going to
traffic's
have
in
to
death.
deal with. Yeah, and traffic's in death, basically denying people care. I'm sorry you
It's
have cancer,
literally
miss.
worse than the defense industry. It's that bad.
It's
Because
horrible.
the defense industry only exists to kill people or threaten to kill people, right? But you know what it is. I mean, the healthcare
Right.
industry is the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing.
It's supposed to be healthcare, and profit is the driving force of that healthcare. It is frustrating. It is aggravating. I feel you on this. One of the other fascinating things to me is Mayor Adams.
Mm.
Mayor Adams seems, in the wake of his criminal indictment, or at the very least, the looking on Adams by the feds, have taken a political turn. Now, I don't know if this is always where Adams was and he just feels free now to do this, but I noticed that when Donald Trump had just gotten elected and Adams was giving interview after interview where he was like, look, we shouldn't call them a fascist. We need to stop this nonsense. This stuff doesn't really help us politically. He started talking about immigration and, Joe Biden administration and these immigrants, they're messing up the foreign policy. Like, he seemed to have taken a turn. Recently, he did an interview where he said this, and I want to get your take on this. And because I wanted to know what New Yorkers are thinking of this situation and whether or not you think Adams is right.
You look at that on a multi-faceted approach of everything that's wrong with the system that we're facing. One, look at the photo that they used to show the victims. It seemed like it was a young, innocent child who was brutally murdered, and it gave that impression. When you looked at the photo that was being used, it wanted to set up in the minds of people that we were dealing with a young, innocent child that, just a Michael Jackson intimidator that, was just brutally assaulted. Then you look at the complete failure of our mental health system, a complete failure from the days of closing psychiatric wards and having those who needed help just turned over into the street without giving any safety net to accept them. Parents reach out to me all the time and say, I'm watching my child go down, or my loved one, my family member going down this serious decline. What do we do? A system where you brought people into hospitals, gave them medicine for one day and sent them back. The young man in this case was going within our system, throughout the revolving door of our system. Now we're on the subway where we're hearing someone talking about hurting people, killing people. You have someone on that subway who was responding, doing what we should have done as a city and a state of having a mental health facility. Those passengers were afraid. I'm hoping that the jury will hear all the facts. Based on all the facts that's laid out, a jury of his peers would make the right decision. And I don't want to prejudge that. I'm just looking at all the facts that are involved here and what we did to get to where we are and what we're seeing, because that could have easily been a case where you saw 3 innocent people murdered on.
That is fascinating, because that is not the typical Democrat point of view. The typical Democrat point of view is, it is outrageous. He just murdered a guy. He choked a guy for 19 minutes. And look, my point of view was, choked a guy for 19 minutes. Like, at some point you could have let the guy go.
Well, I think it was 6, right? But
6 minutes? Okay, fair enough.
6, yeah.
But Adams is basically saying, look, I wish all New Yorkers would get involved if somebody is aggressive on a subway, and that New York itself, by the way, I agree with him about the New York thing. I am one of those people who believe that society should not just throw people away like this.
Oh, sure.
We've been shutting down mental health facilities. Cops are not equipped for dealing with mental health emergencies. They're cops,
100%.
Not, psychiatrists. Give me your take on what Adams is saying there. And do you see a turn in Adams? Adams seems to be, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's politically or otherwise, and maybe I'm getting this wrong because I'm so far away. He seems to have changed. That doesn't mean he's any better at being a mayor. I'm just saying politically, and the things that come out of his mouth seem to be a bit different. Give me your take on that, and whether or not Adams has shifted politically. Would Trump come in?
It's hard to say where he was to begin with compared to where he is now, because this was a guy so his background was that he was part of this group of black reformist, high-ranking police officers in the NYPD back in the bad old days, right? I think they were called like 100 Black Men in Law Enforcement or something like that. And he was a big deal in that group. He was known as someone who, from within the department, was calling for some big changes in favor of the public, for less aggressive policing, or less, physically aggressive policing. And so he, most New Yorkers viewed him as one of the good guys inside the NYPD. Then when he ran for mayor, he definitely ran as sort of a corporatist to the right side of the Democratic Party. Of course, it's the New York City Democratic Party, so how far right is it really? But, he was not a progressive. He was not running that way.
Right.
And he emphasized the fact that he was a cop. So, it's kind of like the Tulsi Gabbard thing. Like, it's kind of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And so it's hard to pin him down ideologically. And I think what's happened now, and I think that's probably to his benefit, right? He's hard to pigeonhole. You've got now he's got this situation where he was thrown to the dogs by the Biden administration and the Democratic Party because he was complaining that the federal government really didn't do anything to help the city post-pandemic and during the migrant crisis financially. And as the city was spiraling down the toilet, he started yelling in public, asking for the White House to throw some federal funds, which they were not inclined to do. And so they're basically, the optics are, let's make this annoying New York mayor shut the fuck up. And so that's what it looks like. Now, that said, he gave them plenty of ways to make them shut him up. He obviously has been involved in some sleazy and tawdry dealings between himself as well as the people around him. That's a separate issue. With Adams, what makes him interesting, and we've seen this with previous New York mayors, is he does say a lot of things that make sense. The clip you just played makes sense to me. And in terms of also the Daniel Penny stuff, I got to say, chokeholds are banned by the police, so the police aren't supposed to use them. So I don't know that encouraging civilians to use them is really the right move.
Right.
And there's also some pretty obvious, he paints a picture which I can, someone who rides the subway every day, I can commiserate with. You're trapped. There's a crazy person screaming and carrying on and issuing threats. You're scared to death, right? Well, there's also other things here too, right? New York City has no cameras inside the subway cars. It has no call panic button inside the subway cars. Down there in DC where you are, the Metro has those. Most modern transit systems have those. Even when we buy brand new rolling stock, those new cars don't have those. So it's not like a legacy thing. The doors between the cars on some of the older lines, they do open. But on the newer lines where the trains are longer, they don't open, and it's a safety thing because there's a big gap between when the trains make a turn, it creates a big gap, and it would be easy to fall off between cars. So it makes sense. Basically, in New York, if you're in the numbered trains, the doors open. If you're in the lettered trains, they don't. Okay. And so, they're on that F train, it didn't open. So all those things he said were true. But I would love to see someone say, "Come on, let's put in a way to call the cops." Also, or you could also have, a lot of cities have rigged it up so that you can use your cell phone from between stations. In New York City, you can't. The cell phone only works inside the station. If you're between stops, it doesn't work. So at least people could use their own devices and call 911. So there's all sorts of things like that are like technological fixes that seem like they need to happen. And just parenthetically, you didn't ask. I think Danny Penny is going to walk, and I think it's going to come down to the testimony of the prosecution witnesses who were fellow riders. It's going to come down to what would a reasonable subway rider who sees insane people every single day think this is a new level. Jordan Neely was at a higher level and was truly threatening in a way that was different than what they were used to. If they believe that, he walks. It'll just be an unfortunate accident. Or maybe I could see it be manslaughter, really, like second-degree manslaughter. I mean, that would be a reasonable conviction. He was urged to release Mr. Neely as soon as he passed out, and he should have. I think so. There's all sorts of issues like that. I mean, at first, when the story broke, Penny was, they said that he was from Long Island, and that sort of implied like maybe he's paranoid and doesn't know the city very well, doesn't know any black people. But that's not true. He rode the subway every day. He had classes in Brooklyn. So I think experience. I mean, having been sat on New York juries, it's going to come down to what would you have done in that situation? Those 12 people, that's what they will ask themselves.
Especially if those people have rode the subway and they're used to that situation. Yeah, I agree.
It's every day. I mean, if you don't encounter mentally ill people in your subway ride, that's an unusual ride.
Wow. I mean, so what is it with New York? They just closed it. I mean, Adams points out they've closed down mental health facilities. And to be honest, they did this all over the world. I think Manila, if I'm not mistaken, did this piece on RT or something like that, talking about the mental health facilities that they shut down all over the world, all over the United States, and how it's like just because you shut down the facility, it doesn't mean that the mental ill just vanish, right? They have to go somewhere. And apparently they're showing up
under Reagan in the 80s is when it really started, and then basically, and you can't. They also changed the laws right after the Creedmoor scandal. There's a very famous documentary about that, where basically people were chained to the beds, and people as late as the 1970s, people were being forcibly committed. Some of whom weren't even mentally ill. There was a guy in my neighborhood who, instead of just getting a divorce, had his wife committed to a psychiatric institution. She was fine, and it took her years to get out.
I want to talk about another issue that I'm fascinated about. Obama and Bill Clinton. So Obama comes out and points out that the Republican Party is involved in weaponizing the justice system to go after its political opponents. Now, this is rich, right? The Democratic Party has gone after Trump for years. And Obama's like, the Republican Party is using the justice system to go after people. Bill Clinton comes out, and Bill Clinton says, what is it? I don't think that we should stop. I think we should stop trying to criminalize politics, both of us. Well, they're acting like this is something that is coming out of both the Democratic and the Republican Party, whereas I would argue this is something that seems to be coming out of more Democrats than Republicans. This is Bill Clinton having a speech. Bill Clinton has been very vocal recently.
Pardoning Trump. And by the way, there's some people who think that Trump should be pardoning Biden.
Well, I do think we should stop trying to criminalize politics. But on the other, I think we should, both of us, because obviously, and the people don't like it, and they're not going along with it from right to left. On the other hand, you have to ask yourself, if you do this blanket thing, is there anything a president could do that he would or she someday would get in trouble for?
You think Biden should be pardoning Trump? And by the way, there's some people.
I'm curious on your take on this. Like, Joe Biden pardoned Hunter for 10 years, 11 years.
11 years, yeah.
11 years, going all the way back to the start of the coup in Ukraine.
Such an interesting date that he chose, yeah.
Very interesting date. And Garland made me aware of this because I knew the 10-year thing, but it didn't occur to me that this was 2014 when the Democratic Party overthrew the government of Ukraine. Yep. Joe Biden became the viceroy of Ukraine at that point. They were able to get information from Ukraine in order to go after Trump, leading to the arrest and imprisonment of Manafort. I had the guy on who was an ambassador in Ukraine at the time that was going on, Telejenko. And he pointed out that for all intents and purposes, Ukraine was owned by the U.S. Mm-hmm. Even when Joe Biden made that speech on stage where he said, I told him to fire the prosecutor or I'm going to withhold $1 billion. Okay, well, the Ukrainian government was so weak at the point that Joe Biden, according to him, was able to get them to fire a public servant. Like, imagine that, right? Like if somebody comes to the U.S. and say, "I need you to fire one of your state prosecutors" or something like that, we tell the guy, "F off." That's
Right.
it'd be outrageous. But that government was so weak and so owned that they did it. I guess my point is Joe Biden trying to hide the goods here with this pardon? That this pardon is not necessarily something for Hunter Biden specifically, but also for him. I mean, if you look at some of those emails where he's like, "I'm sitting with my father, and you're going to give me that $20 million or else." Okay, well, obviously there was a financial relationship where Hunter Biden was leveraging Joe Biden's name for money. And I would imagine some of the letters like saying, "I have to give a kickback to the big guy." Okay, well, the big guy was Representative Joe Biden. Ziegler, and I can't think of the other guy, the whistleblowers, pointed out we weren't allowed to go after Hunter Biden. We couldn't even look at the house, meaning we couldn't even walk and see the house. They even point out that we were even disallowed from looking at connections associated with Hunter Biden, meaning they were fundamentally blocked from that case. Hunter Biden, or Joe Biden, in his statement of pardoning Hunter Biden, said, "Well, I am doing this because this is purely politically motivated." And it's like, dude, how is it politically motivated? Either he paid the taxes or not. I think it was like $1.5 million. And then for the gun thing, he literally did that. So, how is it politically motivated? I guess my point is Garland right? That this is a lot to do also with Joe Biden himself, not just Hunter Biden. Very rarely do you see blanket pardons going back for 11 years. Just outrageous. Give me a take on this. And even what Bill Clinton was saying, we need to stop politicizing politics, missing the fact that it was the Democrats going after Trump for this more than anything else. Who do he think? Like, do they really honestly believe the Justice Department was politicized to go after Hunter Biden? I don't think so. I don't see it. If anything, it seems like the Justice Department was being held up from doing their job in going after Hunter Biden. But give me your take on this. What are your thoughts?
Well, Jamal, I mean, first of all, 11 years is a nice long run for a pardon. Richard Nixon only got 6 out of his pardon from Gerald Ford, going back to his election, taking the oath of office in January of 1969, all the way to his resignation August 9th, 1974. So, that's I guess that might be 6.5. Anyway, that's a shorter period of time. It's about half. I think Garland's right. I think it's a little subtle, though, and it's important to understand the mechanics of it. First of all, nothing in that pardon would prevent, let's say a prosecutor decided to go after Joe now that he's no longer in office. Nothing would prevent that prosecutor from deposing or forcing as a hostile witness Hunter from testifying against his father. So that pardon wouldn't get him off the hook there. But what it would certainly do, it first of all, Hunter can't be prosecuted. So you can't try to flip Hunter by pressuring him that way. He's impervious to flippage. He is, and also obviously he has gratitude. It's like, "Please look out for me." Okay, and Joe can say, "Son, I looked out for you. I did what you wanted. I was a good father. I even took a lot of heat for you." Now, I mean, so the implication is like, please forget some of the things that, we worked on together.
I need you to shut up. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people who are about to be deposed, like, you don't have a legal obligation to have a great memory. And, how good is your memory really? I mean, memory is objectively, it's tricky, I mean, sometimes it fools you. So it's like, maybe better to say, "I'm not really sure," or "I don't really recall." I think that's what we're looking at here.
I want to ask you something else also. Mike Johnson. Well, I can go to Fetterman. Well, Fetterman broke Joy Behart's heart, but I'm not going to go to that one. I'm going to go to Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson recently, because Joe Biden is continuing the war, despite the fact that Joe Biden lost the race. Blinken has come out saying, "I want you to send your kids to go fight," which is astonishingly cynical. They have lost that war, and he's still he wants them to send their kids, 18-year-olds, to a losing war. That is astonishing.
To a war that's over, basically.
To a war that they lost.
This is like in 1918, the
Yes.
Allies signed the surrender. They signed the armistice, and it was dated November 11th. So for several days, after I think it was agreed upon on the 7th or the 8th, for several days they kept grinding it out, and thousands more people died for no reason whatsoever, other than they just wanted to have it end on November 11th at 11 o'clock because, isn't that cool? And school kids will remember that. Or it's like the Battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812, which happened in 1815 after the war was concluded, but the news hadn't arrived in New Orleans yet. That's not anyone's
They're still
fault.
fighting and dying.
And they fought for no reason, and Andrew Jackson became famous as the hero of New Orleans. Hero of what? You didn't know there was no need for this battle.
It is disgusting. I mean, like, it gets across how horrible these people are. So when it came up, Mike Johnson, Magic Mike Johnson, comes to the podium. Joe Biden wants to send 42 billion more dollars to Ukraine. Now, again, this blows off the fact that this was litigated in the election. Harris lost on this issue. The orthodoxy lost on this issue because the overwhelming majority of the public says we prefer Donald Trump on the issue of foreign policy. It's not that I believe that people went to vote specifically for foreign policy. I do believe, however, that those people, when you're looking at the exit polling and you ask them, who foreign policy do you agree with more or less than the other person? It's not even that I believe Donald Trump fully believes the stuff. It's more so that I'm pointing out that this is what he articulated and what the American public was regarding and judging it by as they were going to the polls to make their vote. Mike Johnson comes out and says this to Joe Biden.
The Biden administration requested to attach the upcoming CR additional aid to Ukraine to $24 billion. Do you plan
$24
to do that?
billion, sorry.
I'm not planning to do that. There are developments by the hour in Ukraine. I think, as we predicted, and as I said to all of you weeks before the election, if Donald Trump is elected, it will change the dynamic of the Russia war on Ukraine. And we're seeing that happen. So it is not the place of Joe Biden to make that decision now. We have a newly elected president, and we're going to wait and take the new commander-in-chief's direction on all of that. So I don't expect any Ukraine funding to come up now.
Basically, no. Basically, no. Sorry, Mr. President. You lost. You're lame duck. You're not setting policy ahead of Donald Trump. We're not going to preempt Trump. We're going to let Trump make his own decisions in regards to what he wants to do. If Trump wants to send money, God bless him. You, sir, no, you are not going to make that choice. I'm fascinated by that. The reason I'm fascinated by it, because the first time around, if you remember, Mike Johnson started off saying, I am not going to give funding to Ukraine. That is not what I believe in. That's not what I want to do. He has a conversation with Donald Trump. Trump pushes him, give the money. Johnson comes out, repudiates himself, and says, okay, I'm going to give the money to Ukraine. Fast forward to now, Johnson comes out and says, no, I'm not doing this. This money is not coming up. Joe Biden is not going to get what he wants on this. Is this Trump or is this Mike Johnson?
Oh,
and I know you don't know it's flat fact, but
there
still,
is no Mike Johnson. There is only Trump.
So there is no Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson is just he's a chimera. He's a hologram. He doesn't exist. No, I mean, yeah, no. That Trump obviously, look, Trump told him to send the money. You're like, well, why did he send the money in the first place? Because it was an election year, and he didn't want it to become a political issue
Exactly.
that Democrats would be able to beat the Republicans with. Look, they're throwing Ukraine under the bus, so just don't have that issue. Send them the money for now, but that's going to change when I'm elected. And he got elected, and I mean, look, Donald Trump, like him or hate him, he is the president-elect. And he gets to have his own. He gets to have his own foreign policy. Happens to be a foreign policy that on Ukraine I agree with more than disagree with. But I mean, it is, and certainly Biden legally, technically, can try to do what he's doing. And I'm sure there's been funds appropriated that haven't yet been dispersed that he can now send, and he can do that. I mean, he can do it until 11:59 on January 20th. But it's kind of like, I mean, he's not just a lame duck. He's like a double lame duck because he dropped out of the race back,
Right.
back in the summer. I mean, not to mention he hasn't really been president for 3 years. I mean,
Yeah.
no Oval Office speeches, no press conferences. I mean, who knows? I mean, Tony Blinken's been running the country, so it's like, it's kind of like just tawdry, and whatever legacy Biden was going to have is
Toast.
trashed, and rightly
Yeah.
so. It's
Yeah.
overdue. It should have been trashed for a long time.
I agree with you. This has been one of the worst presidencies we've ever had. And Democrats are in the bubble on stuff, and they don't get how they alienate the population. They just
Mhm.
don't. In conversations with Democrats, friends of the family, where I've talked to, and they were like, "Well, I mean, Trump is also going to support genocide." It's like, yeah, but you were in office. Why don't you get that, right? Or what do you think Donald Trump is going to do for this stuff? And I was like, look, I agree with you, but what you're missing is that you have alienated so much of the American public by not philosophically being what you're supposed to be. Meaning, we have a party for the rich. We don't need to. And that is effectively what we have. And you get the overwhelming majority of the working class that decided to go for a blue collar billionaire as opposed to the Democratic Party. That's astonishing. That should have like some level of soul searching as to why, as opposed to attacking voters.
They think it's their they think, Jamal, they think it's their messaging. They think it's like, if only they understood us, if they weren't so fucking stupid,
Yeah.
or we were a little clearer, we spoke louder and more and used smaller words, then maybe the morons who we need to vote for us, maybe they would understand how awesome we are and how much we love them and how we deserve their adoration. That's literally what they think.
Yeah. Well, it's worse than that, because now they've decided, well, we need to censor. We need to stop people from being able to say stuff, because if we can do that, then we can bring them back over to our fold and they can hear our messaging and everything else. That stuff is aggravating. Ted, man, always appreciate you, Ted. Thank you for
Thanks, Jamal.
joining me.
Have a great weekend.
This week. You too. Ted Rall, political cartoonist, syndicated columnist. Check out Ted on TMI. He comes up from 10 to 12 on the name of the show is TMI. So
it's the TMI show with Manila Chan. It's and you can get it on YouTube and Rumble. Just go take a search.
Badass. Thank you, Ted. Have a good one, man. Be safe.
Bye.
Enjoy it. All right.